Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good morning, everyone. Phil Penarski here with the Wood TV Live Desk. Hope you're all having a great start to your Friday. Starting tomorrow at the Grand Rapids Public Museum, there will be a very special exhibit on display to showcase the parts of the Jim Crow Museum out of Ferris State University. And joining us today to talk a little bit more about this new display is Dr. David Pilgrim. He is the founder and also the director of the Jim Crow Museum. Dr. Pilgrim, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for an opportunity to discuss our work.
Absolutely. And, this museum, I guess just kind of starting off, Dr. Pilgrim, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about it. How did it get started? Why did you sort of get involved with creating something like this?
Yeah, this started out of my personal collection. I grew up in the Deep South near the end of the Jim Crow period and started collecting the objects. I went to a historically Black college, Jarvis Christian College, where I learned, among other things, how you could use objects as teaching tools. And then once I became an educator, I discovered that these were effective teaching tools. So in 1990, I came to Ferris as a sociology professor, and I used the objects in my classroom. I taught courses like American Minorities, Race Relations, Intro to Soc. And then eventually, the university gave me a 500-foot square room. It was so small, it was basically just visual storage. But we used that little room to start having conversations. People started coming from all over the nation. And in 2012, we moved into our current facility, which, by the way, we've outgrown. And hopefully by 2025, we will be in a two-story standalone building right at the entrance of Ferris State University.
And you did mention that there are just a lot of artifacts and pieces from the Jim Crow era. Can you just talk about some of the things that are a part of the museum itself at Ferris State and also that will be a part of the display at the Grand Rapids Public Museum?
Yeah, the exhibit at the Grand Rapids Public Museum has, I think we have 130 or 140 objects in there. I hasten to add that they've all been placed in their proper historical context. And we also show in both places, although more so at the Grand Rapids Public Museum's display, we show how African Americans use their activism, their achievement, and just living their lives with dignity to confront and overcome objects that, for example, objects that caricatured African Americans, segregation signs, objects of hatred. So our main collection is over 20,000 pieces. I would say the majority of that would be the types of negative objects I've discussed. But we also have a growing collection of objects that show how African Americans pushed back.
And you mentioned that this all started based out of your own collection of pieces from the Jim Crow era. Can you just kind of talk about how that sort of got started with you personally and just really why you felt like, or why you really started collecting these pieces and creating this greater curation of artifacts?
Yeah, I've thought about that question a lot because I get it a lot, and I wish I had a better answer. The first piece that I bought, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. I broke it. It was not a philosophical decision. I just didn't like it. I haven't broken a piece intentionally since then. But in my teenage years, these objects were everywhere, right? These are mostly everyday objects. And so you would find them in people's homes. And, and then eventually I started purchasing collections that others had, trying to tell the story of what it was like to live as a Black person between the 1870s and the 1960s. Luckily, I did not stop collecting objects just from those periods. In other words, we started collecting objects that are contemporary. And so if there's a race-based incident that occurs in the United States that receives national attention, regrettably, there are 2- and 3-dimensional objects that will be created. For example, there are T-shirts that mock and defame Trayvon Martin, and so we would collect those. So despite our name, the objects in the museum are not only objects that were found during the Jim Crow period.
Right. No, and I guess, my next question, Dr. Pilgrim, is kind of just discussing just some of these artifacts and really the museum itself as a whole. It might be hard to look at for a lot of people, really to either see it for themselves or really embrace just the, dark part of history really in America. Is that sort of the goal? You're trying to get it out there so people can really understand it and learn it? What's sort of the goal behind this museum?
Well, again, we are educators, and it sounds trite and mawkish, but I believe in the triumph of dialogue. I believe you can use these objects to facilitate discussions about race relations, and racism. And I believe it because I've been doing it, and we've been doing it for 2 or 3 decades. I think the same things that happen, or the same conversations that happen in the main facility in Big Rapids, will happen with our traveling exhibit. Actually, I'm so proud of the level of professionalism, and I think people will be impressed with that. And so the objects, again, they are placed in their proper historical context. And so we ask the question, why was this heavily caricatured image of a Black person placed on advertising brands? And what does it mean? And what are the consequences of it? And again, we're not suggesting, by the way, that a person has to have a certain point of view. What we're trying to do is to get people to have the discussions.
And I guess that is just sort of the goal of the museum in general. This is kind of wrapping up my last question, Dr. Pilgrim. With something like this, is that just what is your hope for people to really get out of either coming to the traveling exhibit at the Grand Rapids Public Museum or making the trip to Big Rapids and seeing the full museum on display at Ferris State University?
Well, I've been saying that we're an effective teaching tool, and we are, but I acknowledge that it's an unusual approach. However, I have witnessed police departments, politicians, civil rights groups, human rights groups, colleges bringing scholars and students. I have witnessed nuanced, intelligent conversations that were stimulated at first by these objects because they are the evidence of some of the bad in our past. But they are also fodder for the discussions that we need to have today.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Pilgrim, we do thank you for stopping by the live desk today. Again, for everybody watching, if you are interested in checking out the exhibit yourself at the Grand Rapids Public Museum, that officially opens up tomorrow. And if you are also interested in seeing the full exhibit, the full museum, it is available at Ferris State University. Dr. Pilgrim, once again, thank you so much for coming on the live desk this morning.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss our mission and vision.
Absolutely. Pleasure's all ours. And I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the Wood TV Live Desk. I'm Phil Pinarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.